Behind every lunch packed, every birthday planned, every seasonal clothing swap, there is a mental checklist running nonstop. Today, we're talking about the invisible load moms carry and how we can start to lighten it. Welcome to the AI Empowered Mom podcast. AI Empowered Mom is on a mission to reduce the mental load of parenthood through AI assistance, helping moms and caregivers ditch draining tasks and reclaim their joy. I'm Sarah Dooley. I'm the founder of AI Empowered Mom and the host of the AI Empowered Mom podcast. And I am beyond thrilled today to be joined by Paige Connell, content creator, advocate, speaker, and working mom of four who is passionate about building awareness about the mental load. We're going to talk all about it today, what it is, how it shows up in relationships, and what we can do about it. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your family life?
Sure. So I am a mom to 4 kids. My kids are getting older, even though they're still young. My oldest is about to be 8. My youngest is 3. And so we're very much in the thick of it, right? Parenting young kids, early elementary school kids. My husband and I both work full time. We live in the burbs. We're doing the soccer pickups and drop offs and all that stuff. And so, yeah, we're pretty busy over here. And yeah, I've always been a working mom. And so I have that kind of perspective as it relates to parenting.
I read that your background was as an operations manager, and I thought, wow, there might be some real parallels between being an operations manager and being a working mom. Do you use some of the skills you gained in your previous role in managing your household?
Yeah, I love spreadsheets. So yes, I mean, I think a lot of what I did at work, streamlining process, was what I did at home, right? I'm just trying to find ways to make things easier, more efficient, not just for me, but also for the kids and for my partner. And so, yeah, totally. I think if you're an operations person at work, you tend to bring that home just because it applies. I think oftentimes people don't think about it this way, but I know that Eve Rodsky talks about this in her book, Fair Play. Our home is an organization as well. And not the relationships. I like to say that to people. You know, my relationship to my partner, to my kids is not a business transaction, but the home is. Right? Operating a home, that is very much like a business. There's finances involved. There's things that need to get done. And so that stuff can always benefit from some streamlining.
I totally relate to that. I went to business school at the University of Texas, and outside the business school, they have a statue of a family. And the reason was because the family is the most essential or integral unit of the economy and the business. Well, you've become a go-to voice for breaking down the concept of the mental load. How do you define the mental load?
I like to talk about it as a running to-do list in your brain that is everything you need to know, do, and remember for your life, for your kids, for your job, for your relationship. And the tricky part about this running to-do list is that it never gets shorter. It only gets longer. And so once you check something off, typically you have to add 2 to 3 new things to the list. And so it's this to-do list, or some people like to call it the open tabs on a computer that live in your brain, the things you just cannot forget that you have to know and get done. And it also includes, I think is really important to kind of highlight, emotional labor as well. So managing conflict, managing your kids' emotions, managing relationships. It's all of this invisible work that tends to disproportionately fall to women, but every single person has the mental load.
What made you passionate about this, and how did you get started advocating for it?
It drastically impacted my life. I didn't have the words for it at first, but once I did, I couldn't stop talking about it because I recognized how much of an impact it had on my experience, not just of motherhood, but also as it related to my career and my relationship. The mental load was something that I wasn't aware of before kids, before marriage. And if I had been, I think I would have been better prepared. And so what made me so passionate was walking through it, living it, walking through what so many women go through, which is extreme burnout and resentment for my partner and frustration with motherhood and the lack of support. And once I recognized that there was words I could use to attribute to what was happening, but also tools and research and information about this, I felt liberated. I felt like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is not my fault. I didn't do something wrong. This is something so many people are experiencing, and we can change this dynamic. It doesn't have to be like this. And so I am incredibly passionate about bringing awareness to this topic, helping other women not only understand it, but articulate it. Because I think that's the biggest barrier we have, which is that most people can relate to what it is once they hear somebody articulate it to them. But unless they have those words, they feel stuck.
That really resonates with me. And I can remember a time after maternity leave with my twins when my husband and I were both back at work. I was sick and I was just just totally underwater. And I remember in my mind, I can see so vividly sitting at the table with him and saying, I need you to take the lead. I need you to
Mm,
take the lead. But I didn't know how to describe what the mental and emotional load was, but I just needed to take a break from that. And if I'd had these terms and this vocabulary, I could have much better articulated, and he could have taken the lead if I had been able to define what it was. I know there are so many great examples that you share and so many different ways that you discuss the mental load, but what do you think are some of the ones that resonate with people most that help them really understand what the mental load is?
sure. So I think the one that seems to resonate the most is when I say, don't, if your partner tells you that she needs more or needs you to take the lead or whatever it might be, and your response to her is just make me a list, then you don't understand the mental load. So let me walk you through what that looks like, right? Because in order for her to make you a list, she has to be the person to know and remember every single thing and then delegate it to you. And so the mental load is not a physical task. I think this is the biggest disconnect that people have. Men will hear, I need more help. They'll say, great, I'll cook dinner. What should I make? And she says, my gosh, I'll just make it myself. The hardest part about dinner is coming up with what to make. It's
Mhm.
about knowing that my son refuses to eat chicken. It's about
Mhm.
the fact that this kid is allergic to eggs. And so that pasta we can't use because it's made with eggs. It's being the person who knows all of this stuff. That is the mental load. And so I think when you start to break down individual tasks and you highlight the mental load associated with those tasks, it can be very helpful. So, for example, dinner, it is not just cooking dinner. It is knowing what's in your refrigerator. It's knowing what's in your pantry. It is knowing what's about to expire. It is knowing what your kids will or will not eat. It's knowing what they had for lunch because you don't want to give them banana 2 times in a day because we know that's not a recipe for success. It's knowing all this information. It's planning ahead and anticipating next week's dinners. It's knowing you have soccer practice on Tuesday, so you need a fast dinner, not a long dinner, a fast dinner because we're eating at 8:30, right? It's knowing all that information. It is not cooking the dinner, which is typically the simplest part of the task. And
Cool.
so, my biggest thing for couples, and I tell people this all the time, is you can't offload the mental load in one conversation because every single task has so many subtasks that are often invisible: laundry, cooking, cleaning, kids' doctor's appointments. It is not as simple as just doing the thing, right? It's all the
Mhm.
stuff that leads up to it and follows it, right? It's not easy to communicate that in one go around. There's no easy way to explain that to somebody other than kind of granularly kind of going through individual tasks and working through what that looks like.
Well, after people can name it, after they have the vocabulary, what are the barriers to sharing or resolving the mental load weight?
There's a lot of barriers. I think systemically, there's a lot of barriers, especially as women in the workplace, right? There's the motherhood penalty, there's the lack of paid parental leave, there's a lack of affordable childcare. All of these things impact families and parents, but they disproportionately impact women, right? The
Sure.
lack of paid leave, the lack of childcare. We know that women are twice as likely to adjust their careers for gaps in childcare than men are. And what happens in this instance, where we say we don't have paid parental leave, is women take an unpaid leave and they're at home and their partner immediately goes back to work. And all of the mental load and the caregiving responsibilities typically become her responsibility and her accountability. And
Mhm.
then when she does go back to work, it doesn't often shift back, right? The scales don't even out at that point because now she's been doing it for 4 months. She's the quote unquote expert on this baby. And
Mhm.
what happens is because we have these systemic barriers, it actually really comes into play in our homes and it really tilts the scales when it comes to the mental load. So there's systemic barriers. Then there's societal expectations, right? Women are held to much higher expectations than men are when it comes to parenting. If a mom sends a lunch that is deemed unhealthy, she might get an email from a teacher. If a dad does it, it's just kind of funny because dad doesn't know what he's doing. And the expectations are very, very different. Even the way we use different terminology for moms and dads. You would never call a mother a hands on mom, but you would call a dad a hands on dad because we don't expect them to be hands on. We expect women to be. And so all of these dynamics are at play. And then
Mhm.
there's our relationships, right? Oftentimes, the number one thing that women struggle with in a relationship is defensiveness when we bring up these conversations. Because, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that, like, defensiveness, I find to be a very normal reaction for any person receiving critical feedback. As much as we don't want to get defensive, I think if we all look back on experiences in our life when we've received feedback from a partner, a friend, a manager, and it feels critical, our
Mhm.
first instinct is to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
It just is. And so a lot of women will say, where does he get off being defensive about this? I'm the one drowning. But if we took a step back and we just looked at the situation, we'd say, like, it makes sense. Like, any of us would feel defensive in these situations. Now, the question is, what do we do after that initial feeling? How do we respond now? What does that look like? Are we open and curious to change and conversation around these topics and finding solutions? That's the important piece. But defensiveness tends to stop conversations in its tracks, which is very, very difficult for a lot of couples to overcome because it does feel like a roadblock.
Yeah.
So that is one, but I think there are so many roadblocks to these conversations. It just really is super nuanced.
Well, Paige, you bring up hands-on dad and hands-on mom, and one term that I struggle with is working mom. I am a
Mm.
working mom. I have my own company. I had a corporate career before this, but I struggle saying that because of the nuance on the working dad side. But I heard you identify yourself as a working mom.
I
I think
do.
there. How do you feel about that topic and the balance or the two-sidedness of it?
So this is how I feel. One, I think anybody who knows me knows I believe that all moms work or provide labor, whether it's paid or unpaid. I believe
Sure.
that very strongly. I believe that the work that stay-at-home moms do is incredibly valuable. I believe the work that part-time working moms do is valuable. I think all of us are valuable. And I don't think our paid time is more valuable than our unpaid time that we're spending at home with our kids and our family. So for me, in the conversation with women, I feel like that word work has kind of been weaponized or used as this kind of wedge between
Um,
working moms and stay at home moms. And
mhm,
I understand because people say, well, working dads isn't a term.
mm,
The reality of the situation is only 1 in 4 stay at home parents is a dad. So the
mhm,
likelihood that a man is a paid working parent is very
mhm,
high compared to women. And so, you know, I think that is part of it. And for me, when I say working mom, what I mean by that is not that my work is more valuable. It's
mhm,
solely that logistically it looks different. So for me, it's about logistics. So when I say working mom, I think most people understand what I mean, which is that I have a paid job outside of the home or even working from home that I have in addition to my parenting responsibilities.
right.
And when somebody says I'm a stay at home mom, it is providing care during the day is my primary responsibility, but
Mhm,
also I do other things, right? And I don't view either of those things as more valuable than the other. And so for
sure.
me, the word just doesn't hold as much weight because for me, it's not about whether they work or I work, we're all working. It's just a term to distinguish what kind of work I'm doing. And so you could say, I'm a paid working mom. But at the end of the day, I think sometimes we put a lot of weight in words. We put a lot of weight in words because they've been weaponized against us, right?
Yeah,
Especially stay at home moms where they're like, you don't work. Why are you complaining? They
right.
do work, right? They absolutely do work. But I do think it's tricky because of the dynamics that exist and the way that motherhood in particular is this hotly debated topic pretty much all the time. And fatherhood is maybe not so much.
Well, thank you for the mini therapy session to let go of my baggage around calling myself a working mom. Let's talk solutions. What kind
Mm.
of frameworks, like you mentioned, fair play, and what do you find helpful for couples who are trying to rebalance the load?
First and foremost, you have to make that invisible labor visible. And so you can do that with fair play. Fair play has a method that it was a jumping off point for my husband and I. I found it incredibly helpful. It could be a written list. My husband is a paper and pen kind of guy. So he wants to do that. I like spreadsheets. You can do it however you want to do it. But I do really think, even if it's just for yourself at first, not even for a conversation with your partner, but just to kind of get an idea of the weight that you're carrying, write it down. I have the reminders app on my iPhone. Everybody has this. It just comes standard on your iPhone. I'm looking at it right now. There's 51 scheduled tasks. They're just one of them's like respond to email. The other
Mhm,
one's a library book tomorrow. The other one's spirit day reminder. It's
mhm,
nothing crazy and sometimes it's not urgent and sometimes I can reschedule it, but it's that running to-do list in my brain and I put it on
mhm,
paper because one, that helps me see why I might be feeling burnt out at a given time. Because sometimes this number is 35. That's very rare. It rarely
mhm,
drops below 40, to be honest, on my to do list. Sometimes it's as high as 60. And so when it's at 60, I can be like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed and burnt out, but obviously. So,
mhm.
like, what do we need to change here? And so doing that one, I think also helps to kind of show you what the mental load looks like, what you're carrying, all of those things. And I don't write everything down here, right? I don't put everything here, but this is a good indicator. But it also helps you start to have conversations with your partner. So when they come to you and say, I'll make dinner, what should I make? You can say, like, hey, when I'm in charge of dinner for the week, I plan the grocery list, I meal plan, I have recipes, I have a schedule. Like, these are all the things that I'm doing. Let's talk about it. And
Mhm.
so it's really important for having the conversation because I think we can all say, to your point, I need you to take the lead, or I need more help, or I need you to do more. it's all just too vague. It's way
Yes.
too vague unless we write it down.
I love it. And I've got my to-do list here. Now it's shorter than yours. I try and write 3 things that I need to do every day, but now here I've got 6 for today. So just that same kind of
Yeah.
3 is approachable, 3 I can handle, 6 is too many. I need to find a way to show this around and make it visible, everything
Mhm.
that's going into life right now. Well,
Exactly.
you've been a mom for 8 years, right? 8 plus years, as you mentioned, and you've been leading this conversation around mental load for some time. Have you seen any shifts in the way parents and families are talking about the mental load?
I think the term is much more popular than it was, or not popular, but more well known.
Uh-huh.
It is kind of a buzzword right now. You're seeing it a lot on social media. You're seeing it in news articles. It's a term that people are much more familiar with, which I think is amazing. I think with that gaining traction, there's also a lot of people who are talking about the mental load in a way that I actually don't think is super helpful. Like
Hmm.
sometimes I see people say the mental load, and when I go on to watch the video or read the article, and I'm like, I don't know if that is the mental load. And it's not because I don't think anybody's doing that with ill intent. I think it's this
Uh-huh.
word that people don't quite understand, right? It
Uh-huh.
is this word that captures so many different things, right?
Huh.
There's the emotional labor, there's the cognitive labor, there's the invisible labor. There's so much that goes into the mental load. And so it's very
Uh-huh.
hard to kind of
Uh-huh.
capture it all. And so I'd say there's that, but I would also say I think because it's gained popularity and momentum, there's also a lot of pushback against it. And so we're seeing that just in general, I think in gender dynamics. There's a lot of conversations going on right now about gender dynamics and what they should look like, et cetera. And so in that, the mental load is part of that conversation because the mental load kind of pushes back against gender norms within relationships where women carry the bulk of the mental load. But we live in a time where are in the workforce, they're carrying the mental load, they're doing the bulk of the childcare. And so things are really, really inequitable. And
Uh-huh.
so I think it's amazing that we're talking about it more. I think it's incredibly important. I think more and more men are receptive to having conversations about it and trying to understand it because there's more resources around it. And it's no longer vague, which is helpful, right? It's no longer, I need more help. Your wife needs
Uh-huh.
more help. It is, hey, this is inequitable and
Uh-huh.
let's look at how that breaks down in our home. This is what ownership and accountability looks like for a position, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think about jobs, right? I remember I was in a meeting once and somebody didn't do something and we had very clear accountabilities in our company and they were very clearly outlined like we knew, and we were all in this call and somebody was like, whose accountability was this? And we all knew. And we were all like, and the person who it was like raised their hand and they're like, this is my accountability. I dropped the ball because they knew we all knew. This is your, like, it wasn't vague. It wasn't like, oh, we actually don't know who dropped the
Mhm.
ball. It was very much, no, we know who dropped the ball because
Right.
this is their accountability and they're the owner of this thing. And so it's very clear. I think the same thing needs to be true
Uh-huh.
at home. We both need to feel accountable to our home and ownership of things. And so like if there's days like today my husband's working late, he normally cooks dinner, I am going to cook dinner. I'm not going to not cook dinner because he's not here. Like that's not what I mean. But feeling as though there is ownership and accountability over certain things in your home is incredibly important so that in your absence, say you can't do it, right? My husband messages me and says, "Hey, this is what I was planning for dinner tonight," right? This is what I have in
Uh-huh.
the fridge for dinner tonight. And so he is still accountable and
Yeah.
owning that task, even if he's not physically completing it. And so I think that's really important. There's also like this misunderstanding between physical presence and ownership of a task. You don't have
Uh-huh.
to be physically doing the task to be the owner of the responsibility and the planning and the conceptualizing of that task.
Yes, that's right. It reminds me of using a RACI matrix at work. RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And there's a difference between responsibility and accountability. And in your
Mm.
example, your husband was accountable for dinner and he might have things in the fridge, right? But you were responsible tonight to get the dinner on the table.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I think like there has to be a level of teamwork. And I always say this to people: you're going to split up domestic labor and the mental load in a way that works best for your family. It will never be 50-50. It's
Uh-huh.
impossible. It just doesn't exist in a relationship and especially with children because of job expectations, sick kid, whatever it is at any given
Uh-huh.
time. But the goal is to have things feel fair and equitable and to work like a team, right? And so
Yeah.
it is never meant to be you own the laundry and I will never, ever, ever step in to help with the laundry. Like
Right.
that is not what it is, right? So it is the reason we do this work though is to make sure that our home is running in an efficient way. So
Uh-huh.
everybody feels supported and not burnt out and a sense of accountability and ownership. And ultimately, what happens when we have that is we work more efficiently and we have more time. Ultimately, we spend less time talking about who's going to plan dinner and way more time with one another enjoying each other. And so that is a big part of this conversation too, which is it's not meant to create more work for any one person. It's actually meant to create more time.
Well, that is a perfect segue into a topic I'm so excited to explore with you, and that is about using tools like AI to reduce the mental load. Do you see a role for artificial intelligence in reducing the mental load for families?
Yeah, I think people are using this in all different ways, right? I know a lot of people who use it for meal planning. That feels like
Mhm.
a big one. And like whenever I talk about meal planning and the mental load, people instantly have ears perked up because it is probably the thing that is most draining for a lot of
Mhm.
parents and a lot of families is just coming up with meals that are healthy that your kids are going to eat. It's a lot. And so I definitely see that. I see people using it for all kinds of things, but I think like it's the logistics, it's the figuring out all of those things that take a lot of mental energy that people tend to be offloading to AI. I would
Mhm.
also say I've noticed that there's a lot more in the way of tools to manage your calendar where you
Right.
can forward an email and the email is going to be analyzed and that's going to be put into your calendar and it might have subtasks, right? And it doesn't require you to go into your calendar and to do that work. And so I think people are using this in all different ways, whether it's with an app or ChatGPT for a meal plan or whatever it might be. I do think a lot of people are doing it. I think I would say I don't think it relieves the mental load. It relieves some of the work that goes into the mental load. So, like maybe it's the planning, right? Or
Mhm.
conceptualizing, or even the actual doing of putting stuff on the calendar. So, it takes a part of it off
Mhm.
your plate. But obviously, it still requires a human to be thinking about those things for it to even work.
Do you use AI in the management of your household?
I will use it maybe for some things like planning a packing list for Disney, for
Mhm.
example, something like that where I'm like, I've never been to Disney with 4 kids. I have no idea what I need. Doing something like that is definitely something that I will do. But when it comes to kind of day to day management of our home, it's a little bit more analog. But yeah, I think that's the beauty of it is kind of we all have to figure out how it works for us. And for some
Yes.
people, it's going to be much heavier on the tech side. On others, it's just going to be a good old paper and pen.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I love AI for work stuff,
Mhm.
and I use it all the time. But yeah, for some reason, I think mostly because of my husband, I just like haven't translated it as much into my home as much as maybe I would want to. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great tool for a lot of parents and families. And I have friends who jokingly like talk about AI as like their buddy. They're like my
Mhm.
third parent. They're helping
Yeah.
me.
That's right. For me, AI is helping me with the mental load, with the research, the planning, the thinking, and the reminding. I have delegated almost all
Mm.
reminding to AI, and that has been because that's the part of the mental load that really gets my goat the most. I do not like being the number one reminder of the family. I want AI to do that for me.
100%. I think a big part you asked about kind of roadblocks in the conversation. There's a term called the nag paradox that
Mhm.
Laura Danger coined, which is the idea that women tend to be the reminders. They're the delegators, they're the reminders. And it creates this dynamic where men feel like insubordinate to their partner and their partner feels like a manager to them. And then the woman gets labeled a nag for reminding, even though he asked her to remind him, right? And it's this whole messy situation. And so I actually have heard this a lot from people, which is like, actually, this app reminds my husband 100 times, not me. It wasn't me. And so it
Right.
kind of it does take that dynamic out a little bit.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit, and I just have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
We call this chatbot mode, and I just throw out some questions and just answer with whatever comes to mind for you. I want to know what's the heaviest aspect of the mental load for you in your household?
Calendar management.
What about one piece of advice you give to women most often regarding the mental load?
Equip yourself with the language to have a conversation, not necessarily with your partner. It doesn't have to be with your partner. It could be with a friend, it could be with a therapist, but just being able to say out loud what you're feeling is step number one. So my first piece of advice is just start to learn how to articulate what it is that you're experiencing.
We'll pause on chatbot mode. Some of your resources have really helped me. Do you want to talk a little bit about the resources that you have
Oh,
available to help
sure.
moms begin the conversation?
Yes, of course. So I talk a lot about this on my social media channels, but I do also have some more formal resources. So I have a free guide that you can download that is kind of a jumping off point. It also has other additional resources, books I love on this topic, because truly I think there's so much information out there that can be helpful to us. So I have a free guide for you, but I also do have an audio course, and the audio course series is essentially like a private podcast. It is 6 lessons on how to talk to your partner about the mental load. And essentially, the goal is not to necessarily tell you how to delegate or how to manage the expectations in your home, but how to have the conversation in a way that actually creates a productive conversation for long lasting change. And so I do have that audio course available for people who are looking to begin this conversation.
And people can dip their toes in or get their feet wet on your social media, like she is a Paige Turner, and they can find your more detailed or personal content on www.sheisapageturner.com. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, play on chatbot mode. We're back in it again. What about one myth about the mental load that you wish you could dispel for good?
That it's as simple as a task. It's not a task. The mental load is different than the laundry, the cooking, and the cleaning. They're not the same thing. They're not interchangeable. So I think oftentimes people hear mental load and they think chores. They're not
Mhm.
the same thing.
It's not write the mental load on your to-do list and then check off the mental load done. It
No,
is
no. Yeah, you can't say give me a list because it's not a list. It's much more than a list. Yeah.
right. What about the best life hack you've used this year as a mom? Doesn't have to be AI or technology related. What's a life
Mm.
hack that's working for you?
This is going to sound silly, but I have 2 kids who are in elementary school together. They are very close in age. They're a year apart and they fight incessantly and over silly things like who gets on the bus first every single day. So what we have done in our home is we have designated odd and even days based on their birthdays. One's
Uh-huh.
born on odd day, one's born on even or year. And on odd days, he gets to get on the bus first. And on even days, she gets to get on the bus first. And we use it for all sorts of stuff. Like, oh, we can't decide who's going to pick the TV show. It's an odd day. He gets it. Like, sorry. I'm like, I can't have any more fighting over things that don't matter. And let me tell you, this does not stop all fighting in our home. But for for me, I do mornings by myself with 4 kids. I need to get out the door on time. I
Uh-huh.
can't have fighting about who's getting on the bus first. They would sit there and like not get on the bus. I'm like, somebody has to get on this bus. So like, let's go. And so this has honestly changed it. And now they know they're like, it's an odd day, it's an even day. And now they use it to decide things. And so honestly, great hack.
Love the simplicity of this. And I love
Yes.
celebrating other moms' wins. What is a win that made you personally proud recently?
Oh, I never stop to think about these things, which is bad. But I think as a mom, I'm always like thinking ahead and going. And so I don't think often about wins. But I recently just spoke on a panel at a conference, which was amazing. I went last year and I felt very new to this industry. And I remember seeing all the amazing speakers and being like, I would love to do that one day. And then the next year at the conference, I was doing it. And so that felt really great. Like that felt like a win. I maybe didn't acknowledge it that day, but it does feel like a win when I look back and kind of see how much changed in one year.
Congratulations. I'm glad we
Thank you.
acknowledged it today.
Thank you.
Last rapid fire question is just what's one thing you hope moms take away from this conversation that we've had today?
The biggest thing I want moms and dads to take away from this conversation, just in general, is that it's not your fault if you fell into these dynamics. It is very hard not to fall into these dynamics, right? We
Yeah.
talked about the systemic barriers here. It is very, very easy to fall into a relationship pattern where one person is the default parent carrying the mental load despite our best efforts. And so if you've ended up there, it's not because you or your partner are bad parents or bad partners or that your relationship is failing or any of those things. This is not your fault. And so now that you know that, and now that you're aware of all the things at play, you can start to kind of put in plans to change these dynamics. But I really want people not to feel like it's their fault because I think it's a very isolating thing for a lot of people who are struggling with this. And they feel very alone and very nervous to speak up about it because it feels like they did something wrong, they took a wrong turn, and you didn't. This happens to so many people. And until we talk about it, it won't change.
That is so freeing and validating that I myself have come to this in my own, tough spots in my relationship. And I like to think now about society and gender dynamics and
Yes. Yes.
biology and all of the things that got us here, but we have the tools that can address it. And thank you for
100%.
helping me address my baggage regarding working moms. So I'm going to take that away with me too. The mental load isn't just about getting things done. It's about who notices, who remembers, who cares.
Mhm.
And today, Paige and I have spent a little bit of time working on naming it. And I hope that we can continue to spread the message and share it because that's where the real change will begin. Thank you so much for joining me on the AI Empowered Mom podcast. For those listening, if today sparked you an idea or something resonated with you, please give us a shout. Let me know on AI Empowered Mom on Instagram or at contact@aiempoweredmom.com. I'd love to hear from you and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Paige. It was such a thrill to be here with you.
Thank you.